to go.
Cool!
Da 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 Spider-Man, yay. I did not know how to start this video, but hey everyone, it's Knux, and I'm here with a different video than usual. Yes, this is a Knux333 review, but it's not about a video game, it's about a movie, and I already know what you're all gonna say. Like, I guess I'll start addressing a few things before I start this video, because I know there's gonna be some angry comments, considering the nature of my channel. What? You're talking about something that isn't related to Nintendo, Mario, Kirby, and our Lord and Savior Sonic? What are you doing, Knux? Like, why on earth are you talking about movies? Like, bro, you have a life outside of video games? Yes, I do actually. I really love Marvel Comics. Like, if you've read the description of my channel and some of my social media, I don't just like video games, I like movies, shows, all sorts of stuff. But I generally keep it away from this channel because this channel is very much focused on the video game side. So it's very rare that I talk about, that other stuff on this channel. But I am a huge Marvel nut. I'm a huge nut for superhero stuff and all the movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Maybe not so much the DC Cinematic Universe, but I love DC. I love Marvel, and I love comics. Like, I don't read comics as much as I did when I was younger, and there's only so many comic story arcs I've read. I'm very much more so a fan of movie stuff, but yeah, I really love Spider-Man as a character. I've followed almost all of his movies. I've grown up with all of the Spider-Man movies, bro. Like, I still remember when the first Raimi Spider-Man movie was in theaters, bro. Like, I remember all the promotional stuff. Like, they had Spider-Man Pop-Tarts, popsicles. You couldn't go anywhere without Spider-Man somewhere, bro. Like, his presence is just huge. Like, he is the face of Marvel for a reason. Like, you could argue that over the years, other characters have outshined him a bit because of the nature of the MCU. But especially with the numbers this movie is pulling, like, you just can't deny the impact Spider-Man has on all of media. Like, his range is insane. Like, and it reached me, bro. Like, I love video games, but I'm sorry, I just really want to talk about the latest Spider-Man movie because it was a trip. It was an experience. I was thinking of doing a whole discussion with the bros, the new Super Gaming Squad, when it came to this, because there is a lot to tackle here, and it would maybe be better if I bounced off of someone when talking about all this stuff, but I just screw it, let's do a solo discussion. Let's talk about this stuff just straight up, and let me just unleash my comic, movie, and nerd side. I don't care, bro. I will say though, for those of you who are looking forward to my more usual content, the video game stuff, like the essays, the reviews of video games, all that other stuff, it's still coming, but as you know, I'm busy with the whole laptop transfer thing because, right, I got a new laptop for Christmas. It's a lot more powerful than my current one. It actually runs games pretty decently, so I'm setting up a lot of stuff with that. For example, I'm setting up XSplit again, so I'm hoping to stream on Twitch again, and I'm really looking forward to that, but I still have to move some of my files on my current laptop to that one, so that's the whole reason why uploads have been a bit sparse lately going into the new year. I'm not going to come out swinging immediately, but I'm hoping to pick up the pace as the year moves along. All right. Anyway, let's talk about Spider-Man now. We can talk about all that other stuff later. Again, read the community post and my social media if you want more details on all that other stuff, the update stuff. But let's talk about Spider-Man because I think, like, just my hype for Marvel has always been very real. I'll admit it's waned over a bit over the years, obviously, since we had the big finale of Endgame. It's felt like the MCU has really peaked, Like, the hype for all the superhero stuff just has been waning as time has passed. We've had a ton of Marvel shows like WandaVision, Loki, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Honestly, I haven't kept up with that stuff. Like, I know some important stuff happens with the shows, and they're definitely canon, unlike a certain other set of shows, which maybe or maybe not. We're gonna get to that, but I just can't keep up with all this stuff all the time, and especially because I have like a huge backlog of video games and other shows to finish. Like, I can't be invested in a million different Marvel shows, bro. Like, come on. and the fact that I'm older now, and I just can't deep dive into Marvel like I did back then. But a lot of crazy things are happening with Marvel right now. Right now they're really getting into the concept of a multiverse, which is their way of expanding the stakes, if you will, like diving into alternate universes, alternate dimensions, time and space. Like, I wouldn't say the MCU before Endgame was easy to understand per se, because it had its plot holes, but things are getting really crazy now, starting with this movie and some of the other movies like the Doctor Strange sequel that's coming up, and we're going to talk about that too. But yeah, overall, my impressions of Marvel so far is that I very much still like Marvel. I am getting a bit burnt out because of how much Marvel content is out there, but overall, I still have a good feeling with Marvel. Now, when it comes to Spider-Man, I love Spider-Man. Like, my love for Spider-Man has not waned over the last few years. Like, despite how much has happened, I very much love the character. Now, let's talk about these last few movies, because I feel like talking about these last few movies is important before diving into the discussion of this one. So we have the original Spider-Man trilogy, Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, which again, I grew up with and I have a lot of nostalgia for. I'll talk a bit more about the other movies and my thoughts on those maybe in another video, maybe. But for now, I just want to talk about, what's going on with Spider-Man right now. So Spider-Man debuted in Civil War, which I was extremely hyped for that because, bro, I was so excited to see Spider-Man get into the MCU. Like, ever since Avengers happened, I think everyone and their mom wanted to see Spider-Man in the MCU. And it finally happened in Civil War. We got this new take of the character who's a lot younger, and he's clearly going in a very different direction than the previous Spider-Man movies. It's a little more lighthearted. It has this very juvenile like tone, and I mean juvenile in the sense that it focuses a lot on the high school element and Peter being a lot more immature. And obviously, a lot of people have mixed thoughts on that. They're like, "What? This kid is just Iron Boy Jr. He relies on Iron Man tech and help from other people. He's not like the Spider-Man in the other movies where they really were struggling to keep up with these villains on their own. They had no fancy technology. They didn't have all these friends to help them out. It was pretty much them against the world in the older Spider-Man movies." And I will admit, I like that about the Spider-Man character. I do think Spider-Man movies should focus a lot on the relatability of Peter Parker, because I feel like that's a big part of his character and a big part of why Spider-Man is one of the most popular superheroes. Like, the fact that Spider-Man isn't a fancy king or this skilled assassin or this genius, like the fact that he's literally just, someone who got bitten by a spider and has powers all of a sudden, is what makes the character so endearing. Anyone can technically be Spider-Man in the right circumstances. Like, I feel like Into the Spider-Verse really nailed that message perfectly, which is why Into the Spider-Verse is one of the best Spider-Man movies, if not the best. If I do a ranking on Spider-Man movies, that's going to be really interesting, because after this movie, I really need to rewatch all of the Spider-Man movies. All of the Spider-Man movies, bro. and there's a reason for that, besides nostalgia. There's going to be a reason for that. But yeah. With that being said, I guess we can just dive straight into the plot of this movie. I don't want to find myself rambling for too long, but honestly, I don't care. Like, this is going to be a full review of the movie. It's going to be very long. I'm going to be like just nerding out over everything, discussing all the plot points of the movies, what I didn't like, what I did like, all that stuff. I'm not holding back with this video because I just want to vent about Spidey bros. Like, I don't care if this channel is like 99% video game stuff. I don't care if this video is gonna bomb. Like, this video is probably gonna bomb. I know it. I know how this channel has been on a bit of a rough slope in recent years. I've given up trying to figure out the YouTube algorithm all the time, bro. Like, Whether or not this video bombs or not, I don't really care. But without any further ado, let's just get into all of it. All right, so where on earth do we start? That is the question. I guess we'll just pretty much go in order on all the shenanigans that happened with this film, And I should stress this now before I do my crazy deep dive. I should stress this now. This is a spoiler review. This is a spoiler review. I'm gonna put it in the title, so if you've seen the title, you should know this is a spoiler review already. But I'm gonna just say it again just to make sure, because I really don't want you should probably go into this movie blind. Like, if you go into this movie completely blind, it is an experience. Though there's a good chance that that you probably know most of the big shocking elements of the movie. Like, if you've just seen the trailers and the speculation around this movie, there's a good chance that you know all the surprises that this movie has to offer, bro. Because yeah, there's elements about this movie that have just been like the worst kept secrets in the entire movie industry, in all of media, bro. Like, this movie's secrets have been like leaking like ever since the name announcement of this movie, bro. Like, it is just insane how much of this movie was just spoiled by leak talk, by speculation. Like, I almost wish that we went into this movie completely blind, because if we didn't know certain things about this movie based on speculation, this movie would have been a wild riot. Like, seeing all this stuff come out of like flat out nowhere would have been insane. But, because of the build up to this movie, a lot of the major surprises are not that surprising, like if you've kept up with speculation talk. But anyway, let's get into how this movie starts. So this movie obviously starts from Far From Home. Now, if you've seen Spider-Man Far From Home, what happens with that movie is Peter befriends this dude who goes by Mysterio, Quentin Beck. At least that's what I think his name is, Quentin Beck. Yeah. He goes by the identity Mysterio, and he originally thinks that he's this super good guy from another dimension who's trying to help the world. But no, he's just trying to use Tony's drone tech against him in order to become this awesome superhero and make Tony and Peter look like idiots, basically. And then towards the end of that film, things get really crazy because, Peter obviously knows his secret, so he straight up tries to kill Peter and his friends, and it gets kind of crazy, by the end of that film. Now, Far From Home, while there's a lot of things I like about that movie, it has a lot of stupid elements to it. Let's just put it that way. Like, Far From Home and Spider-Man Homecoming are movies that have a lot of elements that I like, but have elements that I don't like because of the writing in areas. Like, it gets really dumb in certain parts of those movies. But basically, by the end of Far From Home, they do something pretty crazy, for the character of Spider-Man, just have his identity flat out revealed. So that's where this movie starts, Mysterio has revealed Peter Parker to the world, so now Peter basically has to deal with this. And right off the bat, they really go for what you would expect with his identity getting revealed. People just being all over him, showing up at his house in helicopters and like banging on his door. Some people believe that Spider-Man is responsible for what happened to Mysterio in that movie's Endgame. So some people just flat out think he's a murderer, and because his identity is out there, it leads to him straight up getting arrested. Now, I thought, I was thinking, like, how on earth are they going to, deal with this whole quote unquote multiverse storyline, which obviously, if you've seen the trailers and stuff, this is a big multiverse storyline. But how on earth are they going to balance out all this multiverse stuff with the story of Peter being framed by Mysterio and having his identity outed? And the answer to that is, in terms of the identity thing, they really focus on that a lot. They show how it's messed up his life, because at one point, Peter is transitioning into college, and excuse me, sorry, my throat like just croaks, like because I'm talking so much. I need to take a sip of water every now and then. But ooh, okay. Where was I? Okay, so Peter at some point applies for college because obviously he was in high school throughout this trilogy. So he's now moving to college, but because of all this controversy and his identity being outed, he basically gets denied. So they do a good job of showing the consequences of, messing with Mysterio. And I think that's great. I was afraid that they were going to basically shake it off entirely and not even focus on that plot point at all, going into this movie. But they do focus on it. Now, in terms of the legal thing, as in Peter getting arrested, I was thinking, like, are they going to have an arc where we go through like the whole court process? And basically, they just kind of shrug that element off, the legal consequences. They shrug that off completely. How, you may ask? Oh boy, they have Charlie Cox's Daredevil in this movie. Now that was in the leaks, and I honestly never really believed that leak because I was like, no way they're gonna bring in the Daredevil from the Netflix series, because as great as the Daredevil Netflix series is, all the Marvel Netflix shows were really good, bro. Like, I miss Luke Cage. I miss him so much, but the fact that he's actually here is insane to me. So that brings up a ton of questions. Does that mean basically that the Marvel Netflix shows are indeed canon, despite them canceling them and basically shrugging them to the side? Does that mean they are canon, or what they're doing is, are they rebooting them into the MCU and they're going to give them like new solo movies and stuff? Like, I have no idea what's going on with that. But either way, I'm glad to see Charlie Cox is getting a second chance at Daredevil, because he's a really great actor. He was fantastic in that Daredevil series. Like, bro, the fact that I freaked out when I saw that he was in this movie, it's really good stuff. But again, it adds a lot of questions to what is going to happen with his character in the future. And what about like Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and, oh God, Iron Fist? Oh God, don't, I say all the Marvel Netflix shows are good, but not all the time, because season 2 of Jessica Jones and Iron Fist, oh man, that's a whole other can of worms. But yeah, point is, I'm glad to see Charlie Cox's Daredevil here, and I think that'll mean interesting things for the future, assuming they don't mess it up, but we'll see what happens. But basically, he gets Peter off scot-free, which I do think is like, like, we know he's a good lawyer. Like, if you've watched the Daredevil Netflix series, he's a really great lawyer, but to be so good of a lawyer that he like just gets him off of all those murder charges like that, I don't know, bro. Especially when they like found the Stark tech within Mysterio's drones. Like, how on earth did he save Peter from that, bro? Like, I don't know. I don't know about that. That was a bit rough. But either way, I do like how they do show the consequences regardless still. Like, people are blaming him for stuff. So obviously, because he's like straight up getting kicked out of colleges and stuff, he needs help with this situation. And who better to turn to help to than Doctor Strange? Clearly, like, that's clearly the first thing I do when my problems get too hard. I go to a magic doctor and just ask him to help me with the situation. Which I do think is a bit weird, that Peter's first idea of a solution to this problem is to go to his magic friend and ask him to perform magic to get him out of this situation. That's definitely a very bizarre plot point. Like, and we've known that since like the early trailers. Like, Doctor Strange makes it very clear that he'll help Peter with this situation by making people forget his identity, which, I don't know, that has a lot of strange implications. Like, is he just gonna like memory wipe everyone of his identity automatically? But then that raises the question of like, well, he doesn't have the time stone anymore, but just because people forget who Spider-Man is, that doesn't mean, like, that reverses everything that happened. Like, obviously the events of mysterious shenanigans still exist. Heck, the videos and like pictures and media and stuff technically should still exist. So like, I don't know, that's a little bit of a plot hole. But beyond that, that's obviously what kicks off the entire plot of this movie. Doctor Strange needs to do a spell in order to make people forget who Peter is. But Peter has a problem with that, because then, some of the people most close to him are gonna not know his identity. Aunt May, his girlfriend MJ, his best friend Ned, stuff like that. And because he keeps bugging Doctor Strange about needing these specific people to know who he is, that messes up the spell. And that obviously leads to the shenanigans of this movie. Somehow the spell breaks the multiverse. Like, I guess the spell is just that powerful to where it flat out breaks the multiverse. And that basically kickstarts the entire plot of this movie. So it is insane, bro. Like, again, my thoughts on that are mixed, because it very clearly feels like a very easy way to kick off all these multiverse shenanigans. Like, it's not the most perfectly written thing, in my opinion. It's not terrible. I understand the setup for it, basically, but it relies on a lot of little stupid convenient things. Like, Doctor Strange suddenly remembering that he can do this forgetting spell. Peter going to Doctor Strange first instead of, calling the college that kicked him out, which, by the way, the scene where Doctor Strange explains, wait a minute, you didn't call the college and like plead your case instead of coming to the magic doctor and casting this crazy spell. That's like, bro, come on, man. And we know, I kind of can forgive it a bit because we know this Peter is definitely a more naive one. He's definitely smart. He's very book smart, clearly, as we'll see later, but he clearly has some naivety in areas, and we've seen that throughout the films, and I think it makes sense that it would carry into this one, but let's talk about, obviously, we need to talk about what everyone and their mom talks about with this movie, all the multiverse shenanigans. So what basically happens is this multiverse spell begins pulling in villains from across the multiverse solely because a lot of them know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and that's the main connecting thing that bridges them together. We have 5 villains in this movie, which disappointed me because I really wish we had that one more villain that could push us to the Sinister Six. Like, I honestly, once we figured out from the trailers that this movie had multiple villains, I was really hoping this was our big Sinister Six, because I've been waiting to see the Sinister Six on the big screen for so long, bro. Like, I just want to see a team of villains just beat the life out of Spider-Man. I've been waiting for that for so long, bro. Like, it was so cool when it happened in the cartoons and in video games, and I've been waiting to see that on the big screen for so long, but we were just one short, bro. We were so close to greatness, and we didn't hit it. But the villains that they do pull into this movie are nice. We have Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2. We have Green Goblin from the first Spider-Man. We have Electro, oh god, from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. We have Ugly Lizard from the first Amazing Spider-Man. Oh god, I hate that they kept his design from that movie because I hate it so much, bro. Like, you couldn't just slap the snout on the man and just, give him a redesign like they did with Electro, because they basically redesigned Electro. He's no longer blue because of, quote unquote, the energy is different in the MCU, which I can buy that. That makes sense. And maybe they could have done something, a lazy like that for Lizard instead of, crossing over to the multiverse, changed his design and made him look good. Because I hate his lack of a snout so much, bro. But he looks like a Goomba. But regardless, I am glad that he's here, and Sandman is here too, That's the thing. Like, it's very clear that this movie really leans into the Raimi villains over the others. Like, Doc Ock and Green Goblin, they get a lot of focus in this movie. Doc Ock, he's obviously pulled right before his big finale with Spider-Man, so when he's pulled into this world, all he really can think about is beating the crap out of Spider-Man. But as we know, Doc Ock is not entirely evil. He has some good in him. So when Peter starts curing the villains, he's like one of the first ones that really leans into the good side, Like, the whole point of this movie basically is that Peter wants to redeem these villains. He knows they're from another dimension and that they're very clearly not good people, but he wants to help them. And part of the reason for that is his aunt, when Green Goblin happens to stumble across his aunt and doesn't really do anything bad because of his confusion of being in this new world, he gets the sense that while maybe they're all dangerous people, they're still human, so he wants to help them. And I actually really like that element a lot, which leads into another thing I want to talk about, which is the fact that I'm just surprised that these villains are straight up from the Raimi and the Amazing Spider-Man movies, because I thought that they were just bringing in the old actors and these villains for like nostalgia purposes alone. Like, I thought it would just be like some cameo stuff and that they'd be like variants, for example. Like, maybe like it's clearly the same actor playing Doc Ock, but he's just a variant version of him from another universe. Like, he's not the exact same Doc Ock from the Raimi universe. But oh no, this movie straight up makes the Raimi movies and the Amazing Spider-Man movies canon, bro. They straight up make the movies canon. And what proves that is that the fact that they recount the plot points of those movies, like point for point. It is insane. Like, they go out of their way to re-explain the plots of those movies. It gets a little bullet pointy at points. Like, that's one of my criticisms. Another one of my criticisms of the movie. Like, they straight up are basically retelling their stories almost to a point. And if you haven't, and I guess the part of the reason of that is there's a lot of people who saw this movie that probably haven't seen the movies. Like, if you haven't seen the Raimi and the Amazing Spider-Man movies, this movie definitely is not as comprehensible. I'll say that much. Like, because I feel like you need that knowledge from the Raimi movies and the Amazing Spider-Man movies for this movie to be fully satisfying, you know? Like, because if you don't know the deal with Green Goblin and Doc Ock and Electro, Lizard, and Sandman, then they kind of feel nonsensical in a sense. Like, because other than what they re-explain to you, you don't know much more about the characters within the context of this movie solely. So yeah, it's crazy. But basically, Peter decides that he's gonna help these villains. You know, they do cause a little chaos when they first appeared. You know, Peter has a whole fight with Doc Ock just to calm him down, and he solves it by basically hacking his robot arms, which I think is neat. Some people will probably have a problem with that because people have a lot of beef with Stark Tech. Like, oh, Stark Tech ruins Spider-Man, it ruins Marvel, which I think is just stupid, to say the least. Like, Stark Tech is a big part of the MCU. Tony Stark is a major character of the MCU. It makes sense that Stark Tech plays a big role in a lot of stories, especially with this universe's Spider-Man, because of his close bond with Tony Stark. Like, I feel like too many people just don't understand that this is a very different Peter from the one we're used to. Obviously, I think there's stuff that those criticisms are valid. You know, the fact that he relies on help from other heroes so much, he doesn't always fight his own battles all the time. Like, obviously, I think those criticisms are valid, but sometimes I feel like people get a little too overly mad at his connections to Tony Stark and other characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But anyway, so because of, you know, Aunt May encouraging Peter to help these people because she sees them as just innocent people, Peter wants to help them. But obviously Doctor Strange knows that because they're from literally another universe, that they need to go home. And that makes sense. You know, if they stay here any longer, they're probably going to cause a whole paradox or something, which we see towards the climax of this movie. Like, straight up a paradox almost happens in this movie because of the fact that these alternate universe villains are chilling here. It's pretty crazy. So Peter actually gets into a whole fight with Doctor Strange about this. Like, he literally fights Doctor Strange over this. And it gets to a point where Doctor Strange sends him to the freaking mirror dimension. Like, I was surprised, like, how much of the Doctor Strange and Peter clashed over this, to the point where they got into a whole fight. And the craziest part, Peter wins. Like, think of the crazy stuff Doctor Strange was doing when he fought Thanos in freaking Infinity War. And then you see that he's facing Spider-Man, and Spider-Man wins somehow. It's kind of insane, you know? Obviously, he was probably taking it easy on him because he's a kid and he doesn't want to, like, bring out the death spells or whatever. But the fact that Peter gets enough of an edge on him to trap him in the mirror dimension and get back and help these villains is pretty insane. So I will admit, if you're like a Doctor Strange fan, then maybe you're pissed off about that, because you know, in any other circumstance, Doctor Strange would probably whoop Peter. You know, Peter, I feel like people sleep on how strong Spider-Man as a character is because his webs are strong. He has a lot of crazy physical strength. Like, he's strong. He's a strong character for sure. He could whoop a lot more characters than people think. But against someone like Doctor Strange, who has just insane magic, like, obviously Peter ain't walking away from that very easily. All right, so with that, we can move on to the next phase of the movie. All right, so now that Peter has Doctor Strange trapped in the mirror dimension and he has the villain to himself, basically, what he decides to do is he's gonna take the villains to his little hideaway with Happy, because he moved in with Happy to escape all the controversy with Mysterio. And he's going to try and cure them. That's basically what the movie decides to do. And I will admit, this leads into another little criticism. I feel like the movie gets a bit fillerish in areas when he moves these villains casually to this hideout. Because again, these are very dangerous villains who've done some insane things in the universes they come from. But he's just casually welcoming them to his place. And it honestly surprised me they didn't go crazy on him sooner, you know? But I guess they mellowed out just to really get a grip on the situation. I mean, Doc Ock basically has no choice because Peter has hacked his arms. Electro, Sandman, and I want to say Lizard. I guess they're more open minded. Lizard, he doesn't even come inside. He like just chills in the truck. He's like, nah, I'm gonna chill. I think part of the reason he chilled in the truck is because he knew from the start he was gonna turn on him, which makes sense. Like Dr. Connors does not have a good grip on his lizard persona at this point, so I guess that makes sense for sure. Sandman is one where people were like, why has Sandman, decided to side with these villains? We know by the end of Spider-Man 3, the movie that he's from, he's basically good by the end of that movie. So it's kind of weird that he would eventually turn on Peter by this point, but it makes sense. But on rewatch, it made a little more sense. Basically, Sandman, he doesn't trust anyone in this multiverse. Like all these crazy shenanigans are basically spooking this boy. And by the climax, he's just had enough of all this craziness that he just decides that he's gonna get the box and send himself home. He doesn't care what happens. And we know the Peter, oh God, I'm like getting ahead of myself, but we know that by that point, the Peter and other people are dedicated to curing them, and so they don't want to give him the box just yet, but he just wants to go home. So that makes sense why he eventually turned on Peter. That makes sense. And then we have, Norman and Doc Ock. Doc Ock, by this point, once he gets cured, he's pretty much good. Like, which I do like. I like how they don't just make Doc Ock cartoonishly evil for the sake of being evil. They remember that, oh yeah, he's a human person who just was really affected by his own experiment. So obviously when they fix that experiment, he's a good person again, which I really like. They in general, like, they really do a good job of keeping the humanity of these villains. Like, I feel like sometimes with certain MCU movies, they really like make villains cartoonishly bad. And the best MCU villains are the ones where we really get an understanding of what their motivations are. What is their mindset? Like Killmonger, Thanos, even Loki to an extent, we understand why he is the way he is. So yeah. So basically, Peter and, his friends are goofing off and just working on the cures for the villains. I wouldn't say they're like goofing off all entirely, because if they were, people would be pissed. You know how people are with comedy in the MCU, which I'm like, I understand why they lean on quips. They don't want movies to take themselves too seriously, but I understand the sentiment that sometimes the MCU can go overboard with it. But here, in the fillerish part, they definitely make some references. Like, they really go in with the references with older movies, and then they even acknowledge memes, bro. It's insane. And I do think they go a little overboard with that, but besides that, I think it makes sense. We get a lot of great character moments, like really solid moments of Peter just talking and understanding these villains and their mindset. But then, obviously, we know the villains turn on Peter, and the one who basically starts this is Goblin. We know Goblin has this whole Two-Face thing going on with him. If you've seen Spider-Man 1, you get a better idea with it, which is why you really have to watch these older Spider-Man movies to really understand these characters. Because if you didn't watch Spider-Man 1 and you don't know Norman has the whole Two-Face thing going on, maybe his turn would seem a bit sudden to you. But I think this makes a lot of sense if you know his character, because we know that's how he is. He's very Two-Face in the way he works. So he starts turning. He basically encourages some of the other villains to turn against Peter. Like, why on earth are we letting this kid cure us, take away our powers, and then he's just going to send us back where we might not even live anyway, which I'll get into that later. But yeah, obviously that convinces them that, oh yeah, why are we doing this anyway? So they turn on Peter, and that leads to a bunch of shenanigans of them fighting him, bro. That first fight between Goblin and Peter was crazy. Like, the way he picked him up and dove him through multiple floors was insane. That's something I've missed with the Spider-Man movies. I feel like one of my criticism with Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man Far From Home is Peter does not really get to fight the villains one-on-one. Like Mysterio, he relied a lot on the drone tech and illusions, so he didn't really go fist fighting with him. Vulture is definitely an enemy Peter gets up close and personal with, but in Homecoming he didn't really, like, he barely even won that fight. Kinda Vulture kind of just punked himself at the end of that fight. So yeah, it's very rare we really see Tom Holland's Spider-Man kicking butt necessarily. He did go toe to toe with Thanos and stuff like that, but this is the movie that really gives him a chance to, like, just throw hands. And obviously, because he's so inexperienced at it, Goblin just wrecks this boy. So that leads to Goblin, just having an edge on him. And because he's crazy and he's like, oh, let me leave you one parting gift, and he kills freaking Aunt May, which, whew, I was not expecting it. When it got to the point where he calls his gliders and just smacks her with, that's where I knew she was gone. But I was not thinking they were going to kill Aunt May. They've done it in certain continuities. The freaking Spider-Man PS4 game had a great scene of Peter losing Aunt May. So they're definitely not above it. But for it to happen, it's just kind of insane. And it makes sense. This is the third movie in the trilogy. It's the end of the trilogy. It's the start of a new saga. But dang, Peter lost Aunt May. And we know he's already lost Uncle Ben, even though they don't really talk much about Uncle Ben in the MCU, which we're going to get into that a bit later. But yeah, and it's a shame. And especially coming off of losing Tony Stark, that's pretty hard. I feel like that's something people don't understand, Tony Stark was a big part, to Peter as a character in this universe. And people can get mad at that all they want. But the fact of the matter is he lost Tony Stark. He lost someone extremely close to him. So this Peter has felt suffering before, and now he's feeling it again tenfold. So crazy stuff. And I like how they take a moment to just really soak it in. They don't overcut it with some dumb joke immediately. They really let you feel the moment, and I really like that. So then, you know what this leads into, baby. So Peter's friends, MJ and Ned, and speaking of them, I might as well talk about them before we get into the big one. They're here and there, Peter asks them to help him, which I feel like Ned is not necessarily some super genius, so I don't see him as this person who can be like Spider-Man's right-hand man. And MJ especially, the way that they kind of drag her into this like trio and dynamic set of heroes, I don't know, because I feel like the last two movies did not do a good job of writing MJ as a character. Like in the first movie, she was like weird as a character and kind of just was very quippy and didn't really interact with Peter at all. Then in Far From Home, suddenly Peter has a massive crush on her and he's ready to like just straight up start dating her, and she is too. And it's like, what, bro? What happened? Did I miss a movie? So now they're just this really close trio, and I felt like the trio was not very well developed, compared to, like, for example, the trio of Peter, MJ, and Harry in the original trilogy. I feel like that trio was a lot more better handled because we saw that they had a friendship since the first movie. It built over the course of the movies to that last one, and so when Harry, dies and Peter and MJ are by his side, it's really impactful. Like, yeah, Spider-Man 3 has its problems. It definitely could have done things better with Harry's character, but compared to like this relationship with MJ and Ed, it's just not as strong in my opinion. But anyway, let's put all that to the side and let's get to what you all want to hear about. Are Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man in this movie? You already know the answer, yes. I don't even know why I played it up for mystery, because you already know, bro. You already know. It's pretty much the worst kept secret in all media. Like, bro, we had leaks. We had legit footage that was real. That leaked footage was real. So yeah, this was the worst kept secret in all of media, bro. I think the only thing that rivals this is like the existence of Mario All-Stars 3D. But anyway, so Ned summons them trying to find his Peter, which that's one I want to criticize, the fact that Ned can understand how to use Doctor Strange's magic ring is, I don't know about that, bro. Because again, we learned in Doctor Strange's first movie that it takes training to use magic. So the fact that Ned picks up his ring and immediately can create portals, what you doing, bro? what you doing? And apparently he like foreshadows this by saying, oh yeah, my family can do magic, which bruh, if that isn't the most convenient BS ever. So I think that's a bit dumb, but I do like how Toby and Andrew came in. Now, one thing I want to say about Toby and Andrew's Spider-Man is I love how well they treat them. Like, I was thinking that they were just going to come in out of nowhere in the final battle, say, oh yeah, we're Spider-Man 2, and then just peace out, you know, bro. Like, I thought they were going to do them dirty because you know how modern cinema is. Sometimes they just do not treat legacy characters with respect. But this movie surprisingly does. Not only does it remember key points of their characters and key points from their movies, but they have great chemistry with MJ, Ned, and Tom Holland's Spider-Man. So I think they did them a lot of justice. Andrew Garfield in particular, like, it is insane how straight out of his movies he feels, especially since he hasn't played Spider-Man in ages. And Toby is back, and this is his first time being Spider-Man in who knows how long. So yeah, crazy. Although I will admit, Toby definitely felt a little more rusty, I'll admit, which makes sense. He hasn't played this character in ages. He feels a lot more like an older and been there, done that kind of Spider-Man, which I do like. I think that is the role he definitely should play. He should play the older and more experienced Spider-Man. But yeah, I love the chemistry between the three Spider-Men. I even like how Andrew at some point said, oh yeah, I always wanted brothers, because they truly do feel like brothers, which I do like. It reminds me of me and my own brothers. And I just, like, with someone with brothers, I felt the chemistry between them was good. It's very rare we have chemistry that good between legacy heroes and the newer generation heroes. Sometimes it's not done so well. Oh man, Star Wars. But let's not get into that rabbit hole. But yeah. So after that, you know, now that they're here, they pretty much go and meet Peter, which that leads into one criticism I want to have. Like, when they come through and explain, you know, how they got pulled into this whole multiversal situation too. Toby's Peter kind of just says, I have a feeling that your friend needs help, you know, like, which I think is like a nod to the spider sense thing, but I find that a bit corny. It's like, oh yeah, your friend needs help and let's go help him, which I feel like they could have just naturally made it to where MJ explains everything that happened, and hearing buzzwords like freaking Aunt May dying obviously makes him, you know, like, what is going on here? And that's what makes him want to go see Tom Holland Spider-Man, you know? That's a minor nitpick though. I still feel like the meeting between them is very good, especially when they're telling their own stories from their own movies and connecting it to Tom's pain. I feel like that was a great scene. Really great scene. Like, that's what elevates this movie from just kind of like a okay spectacle kind of thing to a really great movie, bro. Like, those moments, I felt that. I felt that, bro. But yeah, that's gonna lead us to our pre-finale, which also, I'll admit, felt kind of filler-ish, similar to the villain curing section, because they're basically still working on villain cures, but now we have Andrew, Toby here, and they're explaining the differences between each other. Even before the actual like fight, when they're on the Statue of Liberty and they're looking for the villains, they just have a moment where the three of them are basically just talking, which I'll admit, you could argue drags a bit, but I think that's a really good moment because, again, it gives us a chance to really have chemistry between these three Spider-Men and focus on the differences between them. Like, because if they just popped in and out with no explanation, you would not get much of an idea of what makes these Spider-Man different between each other. But because we have some downtime to where these three can just talk to each other, we get a good idea of what separates each of these Spider-Man from each other, which I think is great. All right, and that's going to lead us into the big final battle, you know, the one where all the three Spider-Man team up and kick butt. We got that, which I do think is amazing. That sequence where they swing and they pose together, teared up, man. Teared up. I can't lie. I teared up. You know, as someone who's seen all of these Spider-Man movies and have been following these characters like for most of my life, that hit hard, bro. Hit hard. But yeah, so now they basically go about trying to cure these guys one by one instead of like just defeating them in straight on brutal fist fight. We have a fight where they're basically just trying to help these guys out, which I think is a nice change of pace for a Spider-Man finale. Some people would be mad at that, like, what? Why don't they just try and just straight up like fight them and knock them out and then try to cure them? But no, they're just trying to like handle them as carefully as they can, because at this point, you know, Tobey Spider-Man, he's older, he's more experienced, he's not nearly as hot-headed as he was in his youth. Andrew Spider-Man, he's very mellow, obviously, because of losing Gwen. And then Tom's, you know, he's still remembering how his aunt said to help these people. Even when she was dying, she didn't blame him for trying to help these people. So it makes sense that all three of these Spider-Mans at this point would want to help these villains instead of just straight up fighting them in a fist fight. But we get some great action here, though. And I think the finale of how they go about curing these villains is great. Heck, even Doc Ock gets a great moment where, you know, it seems like he's turned back to being evil, but it turns out that he's still good and he helps out in curing Electro, which I think is amazing. Again, the little character moments of this movie are so good. Like, people say this movie has nothing beyond nostalgia, but this movie has so many good little character moments that elevate it beyond just a big pool of nostalgia. Obviously, nostalgia is this big movie's drive. I can't deny that. Like, what would this movie be without, you know, these multiversal villains, without Tobey Spider-Man or Andrew Spider-Man? Not much, to be honest. And we know they had plans to do something different if they didn't get the rights to do this, you know, with Sony. But the way that it turned out and the way they handled these characters, I think, was good. Let's compare it to something like, I don't know, Sonic Generations. As you can see here, I compare this movie to Sonic Generations a lot because that's what this movie is. This movie is the Sonic Generations of Spider-Man movies. It's basically a best hits type of thing that focuses on the highs of the character and only has so much of its own thing going on. However, the difference between this movie and something like Sonic Generations is it has its own story. You know, it focuses on Tom's struggle with trying to live two different lives and balance out being Spider-Man. It focuses on his struggle to help these villains that he's aware of have these horrible fates, and it focuses on the characters in his verse, and it doesn't overshadow him. You know, compare that to Sonic Generations, where Sonic Generations was literally just, you know, oh, this monster starts pulling in old places, Sonic kind of just runs through them. Shadow fights Sonic for literally no reason. Like, it's the present Shadow. He has zero reason to fight Sonic, but he just does because that's what he did in SA2. You know, the writing is not nearly as smart as it is with this film. That much I'll say. So yeah, you know, I had to bring in some stupid Sonic comparison, bro. Like, come on, man. You know, and they're nothing alike. They have similarities, but Sonic and Spider-Man are very two different beasts. That's all I'll say. All right, let's get back to the movie. So they managed to cure Lizard, they cure Sandman, they cure Electro, which by the and yeah, Doc Ock is already killed. Which, by the way, one major criticism I do want to have is I'm not this guy who's always, you know, rambling about special effects and CGI and stuff like that. But I'm gonna be blunt and honest. The reused footage that they used for Sandman and Lizard because they couldn't get the actors, that was very noticeable. Like, bro, you couldn't like recast them or like use some sort of CGI technique. Like, they literally just reused footage for the scenes where they get cured, which I think is just like, and even the scene where they're like teleported back to their universes, they use reused footage, which I think is lazy. That, I'll admit, is like what are you doing, bro? What are you doing? I think they do have the actors back though. They did voice new lines and stuff. It's just they couldn't get them back for physical stuff. Which at that point, just like recast and then just audio dub them or something. You know, do something other than just reuse footage because, bro, it's noticeable. It's very noticeable. But yeah, so that leads into our big epic finale. You know, the last one left is Goblin, and he just swoops in and he just starts like causing all sorts of shenanigans, bro. Like Doctor Strange, he happens to get back from the mirror dimension around this point because he finds his way back out of that. And he's tempted to just straight send them back, but seeing that Peter is helping these people, indeed, he was willing to wait it out a bit. But when Goblin comes in, Goblin just messes everything up, bro. Like, he nukes the spell box that Strange had, and that just kicks off the finale in the full force, because we got a paradox going on, and Strange is like, bruh, like, we're gonna be really screwed if we don't stop this paradox from happening. But yeah, while that's going on, Goblin needs to be taken care of, and Tom's Peter takes this as an opportunity to straight up try and murder Goblin, because in case you forgot, this dude killed Aunt May, so he's not feeling that. And he straight up beats the crap out of him, picks up his glider, and attempts to stab him. Now, some people are like, bro, it's out of character for Tom's Peter to try and murder someone, which I'll admit, considering how happy-go-lucky he was in previous movies, I think it is a bit strange that suddenly he's so pissed off to the point where he tries to murder Goblin. But considering that he hurt Aunt May, of all people, I think it makes sense, because we know from like other comic stories and other movies that Peter does not play when it comes to Aunt May. Like, there's a story where he beats the living tar out of Kingpin for like just daring to mess with her. So the idea that someone has killed her, like one of his only parental figures left, obviously it makes sense that he's gonna snap. But what I love about that scene is Tobey Spider-Man is the one to stop him, and I think that is easily one of the most powerful moments in the movie. Again, the character moments of this movie are so good, bro. Like, I compare that to something like freaking Sonic Generations and Sonic Mania. Like, this movie is not just nostalgia. It understands these characters so well, bro. Like that moment where he doesn't even say anything. He just stares at Tom, like, and lets him know basically without actually speaking that this ain't what we do. We don't just kill people like this, especially when we promised that we would cure these villains and not send them to die. So, beautiful moment. Beautiful moment. But then Tobey Spider-Man gets stabbed, and when that happened, I was ready, bro. I was like, bro, I'm fighting all of Disney and Sony, because if they did all this justice for Tobey Spider-Man just to kill him off, I would be pissed. But it turns out he's okay. He just says like, oh, I've been stabbed before. I'm in pain, but I'm good. Which I think it's like, okay, then what was the point of stabbing him at all? Like, maybe it was like a shock value thing, but I just think it was dumb, bro. Like, because it scared the tar out of me. I thought they were really going to kill Tobey Spider-Man just to like maybe elevate Tom's, or maybe because Tobey didn't want to do the character again. But no, it's just kind of a thing that happens, But yeah, so Tom decides to just cure Goblin over straight up killing him. And that's basically almost the end of our movie. But we still have, the whole paradox thing going on. So what's the solution to this? How on earth do we solve a literal paradox of breaking the universe? Well, obviously, we have to trace things back to the spell and finish it. We need to finish that spell where everyone forgot who Peter Parker was. But at this point, the spell was that, people forgot Peter Parker was Spider-Man. But now, at this point, he needs to straight up cast the spell fully. Like, people need to forget Peter existed. So he casts that spell and he lets him do it. And I'll admit, it's a pretty brutal ending for a Spider-Man movie. Like, people talk about, oh, it's a good ending because it adds stakes to Spider-Man again. It gives Spider-Man some actual struggle, which I agree with. I like this decision in the sense that it gives, Tom's Peter an actual struggle. It gives him an actual problem, something to really help his character be more relatable. But the problem is, this is like a brutal consequence for his actions, bro. Like, he loses everything. Happy doesn't remember him, so one of the last people he had linking to Tony Stark, I bet Pepper probably doesn't even remember him, so he has no connection to Stark Industries now, or anything related to Tony Stark. MJ and Ned forget him, so he lost his best friend and his girlfriend. Aunt May is dead, so he doesn't have her. So this Peter Parker lost literally everything. He doesn't even have the Stark Tech anymore because that got confiscated due to the whole Mysterio fiasco. So yeah, this Peter Parker has probably lost more than any other. Like, he he doesn't even have like Aunt May, like, and even like Toby's Peter and Andrew's Peter have her still, presumably. So yeah, like that was brutal, bro. Now it makes me wonder what the heck is gonna happen in the future for Tom Spider-Man, because we know it's possible he's gonna get yet another trilogy of movies. It's seeming like he's gonna get another trilogy of movies, which I think is neat. They have a lot of potential for stories to tell, with this whole big refresh, but it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with him in the MCU specifically, because he has no connections to the Avengers. And so how the heck is he going to get wrapped up in all that? Will he just show up and they just don't know who the heck he is? Will he actually reunite with MJ, or will they do something crazy and just undo the spell somehow? Like, I don't know, bro. It's going to be insane how they deal with this. I hope they deal with it well, though. Don't just undo the spell and just make the entire ending of this movie pointless. But I definitely do think that they got to get creative with how they continue this storyline. But yeah, that's going to be it for my thoughts on the main movie. I thought it was very good. Again, the character moments of this movie are really strong. They do a lot of justice to the villains, to the legacy heroes with the other Spider-Man, even MJ and Ned, who I don't really feel particularly attached to in the previous movies. They felt a lot more better written here, especially MJ, bro. Like, MJ was not that very well written in the first two, but this one she's very well written in, which I think is neat. So yeah, overall, I think this was a good Spider-Man movie. I wouldn't say it comes close to the morals and the highs of something like Spider-Verse, or even the first two movies necessarily. I don't know. I don't feel like it's going to surpass those. But overall, I think this is a strong Marvel and Spider-Man movie. I enjoyed it a lot. I had a really good time, bro. And despite the fact how much it used nostalgia, I think it was a great time. And before I do my big summary and final verdict for the movie, I just want to add in some last few thoughts here. This is basically the last thing I've recorded, but I wanted to make sure I edit in some of my last few thoughts in before I get to that summary and final verdict, because I don't want to forget something and then be rewatching this review and be like, why didn't I talk about that? So this is kind of a quickly edited section I'm going to put before my final few points, but let's talk about, again, the performances. I thought the performances were great. Toby and Andrew, they really captured their version of Peter Parker again. Again, Toby, he definitely felt rusty, I'll admit. Like, sometimes it felt like he was out of it. But overall, I think his performance as Peter Parker and coming back was great. The villain performances were amazing. Like, bro, Willem Dafoe, goated. Like, that man is easily now one of the best MCU villains, without a question. I always thought he was a great villain because of just how intimidating and just raw evil he can be. Like, sometimes you don't need a villain that has this deep, complex story, and there's complexity to Norman Osborn as a villain, but sometimes you just like a raw threat, and that's what Green Goblin is as a character. And I really like that he came in and became basically the main villain of this story. He's the one who really makes things go wrong in this story, and I like that. It fits his character to a T. Doc Ock, same thing, he's not necessarily this insane evil guy, because we know it's mostly thanks to the experiment having gone wrong that he is the way he is, and I'm glad they treat that with respect and don't just make him this goofy villain that hates Spider-Man for no reason. So very good stuff. Electro, oh man, Electro is funny to me, because he feels very different from how he is in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and that's obvious because they had to shake some stuff up from those movies to sort of redeem them. Like, Jamie Foxx, I feel so bad for him when it came to that movie, because basically they just made him this nerd that didn't really have anything memorable about him, and then when he becomes Electro, he's this ugly blue Smurf monster. But now he's here, he's normal in this verse, and he's kind of just playing Jamie Foxx. He's so chill compared to how he was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And Andrew even says, Max was a pretty cool guy when he knew him, and that's mostly because he was this passive nerd. But moving to this universe, he's kind of just this chill dude now, which is I just find funny, It's definitely really weird when comparing it to how he was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but overall, I think it was a good portrayal. And then Sandman, Lizard, they were just all right. You can tell they're the villains they focused on a little less. and they just feel plucked out of their movies, and there's really not too much more beyond that, which is a shame because I would have liked to see, you know, a little more depth with Sandman, considering how deep of a character he could be. Like, he had a really great arc in Spider-Man 3, you know, despite my problems with Spider-Man 3, he had a really good arc in that movie. So I wish they elaborated him on a bit more. And that leads into another criticism I want to throw in before I get to my end point, which is the fact that we don't necessarily get an idea of what happens with, you know, Toby and Andrew and the villains going back to their universe. So when we go back to their universes, are we just going to see these guys living normal lives now? Or is there potential for them to become villains again? Like, we don't know. They don't really show that. And I feel like just showing that real quick would have been nice, you know, just to really confirm that everything we did in this movie was not in vain. But yeah, other than that, I don't think that's pretty much it in terms of performances. One more thing I do want to talk about, actually. Let's talk about the story and what outlined this movie. So a lot of people say that this movie was basically one big response to the criticisms towards Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Like, oh, they did everything in this movie because it's been a grand plan. They've been planning this since the beginning. But no, it is very clear that every decision with this movie is in response to fan criticism. Like, some people say it's been some grand plan that they've been outlining since the start. Oh no, bro. Oh no. This is something that they, like, the way this movie is pretty much shaped by what fans wanted. And there's not much more to that, you know? Like, look at the memes, the fact that we have free Spider-Mans on screen, the fact that we have all these legacy villains, the fact that, you know, they focus so much on the character moments and nailing these characters. You can tell they were really just trying to listen to what Spider-Man fans were complaining about over the course of these last two movies with Homecoming and Far From Home. So yeah, which there's nothing wrong with that. I love the fact that they did listen to that criticism. You know, it would be nice if certain other corporations did that more often when it came to their characters. But yeah, so that's gonna be it for some of the stuff I wanted to, like, really get out of the way before I get to my final few points. All right, bro. We're pretty much almost at the end here. I guess the last thing we can talk about is the post-credit shenanigans and some last few bullet points regarding the movie. So first up, let's talk about that first post-credit scene, which reveals that Venom, the Venom from the Venom spin-off series, was dragged into this universe. So yeah, the Venom movies are canon, which, man, all I can say is I wish those movies were better because I would enjoy this a little more, but I hate those movies so much, bro. Like, the first Venom movie and Venom Let There Be Carnage were bad, bro. Those movies are bad. They do Carnage so much injustice. And the fact that this Venom is the one that's canon and potentially might be the only Venom we get in the MCU, it's just pain. I hate it so much. It's probably the biggest thing I hate about this movie. I hate the fact that the bad Venom is canon, bro. Like, no disrespect to Tom Hardy, but I just hate his portrayal of Venom, and I just don't think he fits in the MCU, and he shouldn't be the Venom that we get in the MCU. Now, we know that we're gonna get some Venom storyline in the MCU because when Tom Hardy's Venom pieces out, basically, he leaves behind a symbiote. So we're going to get some symbiote story, but we have no idea what direction it's going to go. Are they going to go for the traditional Eddie Brock story and have a whole new Eddie Brock? Is the Venom from the Venom spinoffs going to come back and fight Tom Holland's Spider-Man? We have no idea what the heck they're going to do with that. You know, I would really love to see a just flat out traditional Spider-Man versus Venom story, Spider-Man versus Carnage story, but I don't know if we're going to get it, bro, especially since they're connecting to these crappy Venom movies, bro. It's frustrating to say the least, but it could lead to some crazy stuff, but I'm mixed on it, bro. And then the last post-credit scene is basically a Doctor Strange 2 trailer, which it looks like Doctor Strange is basically going to be cleaning up the shenanigans of this movie, because while he did temporarily solve the paradox thing, it's clear that the multiverse in the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now is just a mess, bro. Between Loki shenanigans and apparently things with Wanda, which oh boy, you already know Wanda's gonna act a fool in this next movie. Like I hear some crazy things happen with WandaVision, so I just assume she's just mentally unstable right now. But yeah, the future of the MCU has a lot of potential. Oh yeah, and I saw that cheeky little reference. I apparently there's a missing astronauts. That's something that's acknowledged, which ooh boy, Fantastic Four. Let's hope they make it good this time. Oh man. Oh man. But yeah, overall, great, a solid movie, bro. Like, there's definitely things I don't like. You know, again, the reused scene thing is dumb. Bringing in the Venom from the Venom spin-off movies is dumb. Certain plot points I think could have been fleshed out a little more. But overall, the way that the characters are written are strong. There's really good character moments in these movies, besides a few, you know, moments where it's like, okay, that's just stupid. You know, I overall thought it had a very strong story, even beyond all the nostalgia. And especially for someone like me, you know, someone who's seen all of these movies, like I'm probably the most likely person who would give this movie a freaking A plus. But no, I acknowledge this story does have problems, but overall, I would say that this movie is a solid A minus. That would be my final ranking. A solid A minus. That's what I'm gonna slap on here. So any last thoughts I want to throw in? There's a few last thoughts I want to throw in. Like, what is the future of Spider-Man? Well, Tom Spider-Man basically has nothing right now, so he basically has a fresh start, and there's a lot of directions you can take that. One direction I think they should go is they should definitely have a movie where he fights Kingpin, because we know Kingpin exists in the MCU. Spoilers for freaking Hawkeye. You know, he was in Hawkeye's that show, so he exists. And now that we know Daredevil is in the MCU, there's potential for him to team up with Daredevil and fight Kingpin. So that's definitely a story right there. I think they should. I think one way they can naturally continue off of this story is go straight to Kraven, because we know Spider-Man is still wanted for the shenanigans with Mysterio, but people just don't know he's Peter now. So most likely that means he's still pretty wanted by people. So if they want it, they could go into a Kraven storyline where someone hires Kraven to go fight Spider-Man, maybe Kingpin. This could be a good way to have Kingpin as a recurring villain for the next trilogy. Kingpin hires Kraven to fight him for the fourth movie. Shenanigans happen there. You know, maybe Daredevil gets involved. Then you have a fifth movie and a sixth movie, which I imagine could focus on the symbiote shenanigans. Like, that could honestly be two movies. That could honestly be two movies. So yeah, this next trilogy, I'm very interested with what they do. I hope they really use these characters well, and they could also throw in some of the more obscure Spider-Man villains in there. There's a few left they can use, surprisingly. Like, Spider-Man has a big rogues gallery, and then that leads into Tobey and Andrew, which apparently there's talks for them to get new Spider-Man movies too, which I think would be cool. What I would want to see for those, for Tobey, I really want them to focus on a story with an older Spider-Man. You know, one already married to MJ and has to deal with being Spider-Man, you know, at not necessarily his prime. I think that would be a very interesting story to tell with his Spider-Man particularly. I'm not necessarily saying they need to pull a Logan and have this gritty Spider-Man movie where, like, he dies at the end. God, no. But I think they can definitely focus on more mature stuff with Tobey's take of Spider-Man. And then Andrew's Spider-Man can basically just be him dealing with his grief, you know? He deals with having to lose Gwen. Maybe multiverse shenanigans happen, and he can reunite with Gwen through the form of Spider-Gwen. That would be something interesting. So there's a lot of potential for all these Spider-Men. My only worry is, how the heck do you do movies for Tobey, Andrew, and Tom Spider-Man? You know, like, how on earth do you balance that out? Because we're talking like a whole new trilogy for this Spider-Man we've known since Civil War. A theoretical Spider-Man 4 for Tobey, and then a third Spider-Man movie for Andrew. So that's going to be a bit confusing. But other than that, I think that all has potential. If they do it right, there's potential for them to screw it up. Trust me, they can screw this up easily. But with the right care, I think they can tell some good stories with all of these Spider-Man characters. So what about Tom? Speaking of Tom Peter's future, you know, what's going to happen with his connection with the Avengers and MJ and Ned? I have no idea. Again, the Avengers, he might just show up to some worldwide crisis and just interact with them again and maybe just join them again by chance. Who the heck knows? And maybe he'll get together with MJ, or maybe they'll bring in another character. I have no idea, bro. It would be interesting if they brought in Black Cat. Like, I feel like Black Cat could maybe fit in alongside the Kraven storyline or the symbiote storyline or something. Like, I really think Black Cat is long overdue for live action Spider-Man. Another thing I want to discuss with Tom's next trilogy is he theoretically should know a lot of the villains now that exist in Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery, because he's met Doc Ock, he's met Norman Osborn, and we know that Oscorp doesn't exist in his universe. So what the heck is going to happen there? Are they going to do a Goblin storyline? Honestly, I hope they don't, because as much as I like Goblin storylines, I feel like at this point, there's really no reason to. If Oscorp doesn't exist, I feel like there's no point in Peter having to deal with Green Goblin as a character. I'm not saying they need to retire him. I feel like they could do something with him, like in maybe Andrew's new movie or Toby's, but overall, I feel like there's no room for Goblin in Tom Spider-Man. Now, it could be possible he meets like an alternate Norman Osborn or something like that, but again, he should be well prepared for these guys because he knows their names, he knows what villains they become, so yeah. That'll remove some stakes there, so it'll be really interesting to see what they do on that front. What else? Oh yeah, Vulture and Scorpion, they still exist, because they were teasing their return in at the end of Homecoming, and I was thinking maybe they'd be villains in this movie, but no, they're still in jail, and they still set something up with them, so maybe they could pop back up for this next trilogy, and Spider-Man doesn't, he knows who they are, obviously, but they don't know who he is, so that could be some sort of conflict there. There's a lot of potential for the future of Spider-Man, bro. It can get very crazy. And I just hope they do it well, I have more faith in Spider-Man specifically than the MCU as a whole, I'll say that much. And especially other superhero movies, because, oh boy. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to say in regards to Spider-Man No Way Home. I think it's a solid movie, A- ranking. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I might as well stop now before I make this video longer than it needs to be. This video is already probably stupid long. But yeah, that's going to be it for me, bro. Like, I had a lot of fun with it. And if you've seen it, please let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below. I would love to have some good discussion about this movie in the comments, but I don't know about that, bro. I'm probably going to get mostly angry comments about where's my Mario content, where's my Sonic content, stuff like that. But overall, I just wanted to do something new, bro. I just really wanted to talk about this movie. So if you made it to the end of this video, please leave a like, please leave a comment giving your thoughts on the movie. And that's going to be it for me, bro. That's going to be it for me. This has been Knux, and I'm out. Peace.